Hello, and welcome to the Fairy Tale Unit. This is the Seven Swans. Just as a reminder, there's some things you need to be thinking about as you are completing this particular project. What are the things each fairy tale is telling you about the society it's written for? How does each fairy tale react to the supernatural? Why? How does each fairy tale treat men, and how do they treat women? How is each fairy tale different depending on where it is written, and how is it the same? And how are the movies, clips, poems, and articles related to this story? Now, the thing about this particular one, this is a hard one. For some reason, people don't adapt the Seven Swans. I don't know why. It drives me nuts. So it's number 20. It's just a little musical by Pink Fong, who are the baby shark people. It's not bad. It's a pretty cute one. So there's a variety of stories that we've got. So let me just give you the Cav version. My favorite adaptation of the Wild Swans. Now, the other thing about the Wild Swans is it hasn't been adapted into many movies, but it's been adapted into lots of books. So, Hans Christian Andersen wrote one, the Grimm brothers wrote one, like everybody writes one. So, the Seven Swans. Once upon a time, there's a king, and he's got 8 children. They're all lovely. 7 boys, 1 girl, and he loves his children. Now, he decided that it wasn't really okay for them to be orphans, so he decided to marry again. But unfortunately for him, he had made a bad choice, and he accidentally married an evil sorceress. Some say he's enchanted. Some say he's just dumb. Either way, the point stands. And this particular lady does not like the children at all, because they don't really care for her, because she's an enchantress. So she's like, all right, I gotta get rid of these kids, but I have to do it in such a way that my husband doesn't know. So she decides to trick the brothers, and she, tells them all they're going out to collect something. She needs them all to go with her, as a stepmother-stepson bonding activity. And she lures them out and turns them all into swans. And the brothers are like, huh? What? And now they are cursed to be swans, and they can only turn into humans on, the night of the full moon. So once a month, they get to be people. And so they fly off trying to figure out what's what. And then she turns her attention on the sister, whose name is Sorsha or Elise, depending on what translation you're looking at. And so the little sister is like, I don't care for this. And the stepmother has been trying to drive a wedge between her and her father for a long time, and so finally she just runs away. She's like, I can't do this. Where are my brothers? I can't stand not knowing what happened to them. Everyone's saying they ran off and abandoned us, and I don't believe that's true. So she runs away to try to find her brothers. And she is out in the forest, and she falls asleep in an enchanted grove. And this lady of the forest appears to her and is like, hey, your brothers have been turned into swans. And she's like, oh, that's why they ran away and I keep being followed by birds. Okay. And because their swans keep following her around. And she's like, this is weird, but I'll bite. So she's like, all right, here's what you have to do. You see this stinging nettle? And the girl's like, yeah. She's like, well, I'm going to go with Elise. She's like, Elise, you need to pick the nettle and grind it up and weave it into yarn to fibers and then sew it into shirts. And Elise is like, yeah, but isn't that going to hurt my hands? And she's like, yes, it will. It will hurt them a lot. They will be disfigured and bumpy and very, very painful. It's like, but that's not all. And Lisa's like, oh, tell me more. She's like, you also will not be able to speak. From the moment you pick that first nettle and start to weave, you will not be able to talk. Anytime you talk, if you talk after that, your brothers will die. And Elise is like, whoa, okay. She's like, are there any other options? And the fairy's like, nope, none at all. That's all we got. And she said, okay, point me to the nettles. So she begins the process. She's got to make these 7 shirts, 1 for each brother. So she's working on her nettle shirts and living in the forest, and her hands are super gnarly and gross. But she doesn't mind because she's going to save her brothers. Now, shortly after this, it's the full moon, and her brothers pop up, and they're like, little sister! And she's like, because she can't talk. They're like, she's been enchanted. But after a lot of pantomiming, because they can do that, they figure out, oh, she's breaking the curse. Okay. But they don't want to leave her in that kingdom, and they're traveling across the sea. So they decide to make her a bed, and they carry her across the sea with them. And there's a little spot. They have one island where they can all just barely stand together. But they stand on this little rock because they have to stop and rest. It's just her and her swan brothers. And finally, they get to the other kingdom. And the swans, like, find a nice little house for her and help her get all set up. So, she's there. She's weaving. She's got 3 shirts done at this point in time. Okay? Then, there's a hunt. And the king of this country is riding along, and he's young and handsome. And he sees this girl just sitting there weaving. And he's like, she's pretty. Also, why is she all alone? Why is she weaving? Why is she surrounded by nettles? I should help her. And he's like, do you want to come with me? And she's like, but he's real cute. So she's like, in her head, she's like, I would like a bath. So she goes with him, and he lets her take her stuff. So she's got her shirts and her nettle collection. And so she's there, and she's just really charming, despite not being able to talk. Notice the eye roll. And the king is like, you're really charming. Now, in some stories, in some adaptations, they figure out a way to communicate without talking. Like, with sign language and with their eyes, and they're both very expressive, which I like better, because that's less creepy. But in the traditional story, he's like, she's pretty, I'm going to marry her. And she's like, I can't talk, so sure. So they get married. And then the queen so now she's the queen, and she's continuing to knit, but everyone is like, our queen is just silent, and she's knitting all the time, and she's surrounded by nettles, and you only get nettles in the cemetery at midnight, and everyone knows that's where the witches go. And so rumors surround her, and everyone's like, and the priests are like, yeah, she's evil, and the king's like, no, she's not, she's lovely. But unfortunately for her, she runs out of nettles, so she has to go pick some. Now, so she gets to the cemetery, and she sees the witches having their witchy party, and she's like, I don't like this, but she prays, and they don't bother her because she's praying. In fairy tales, that's how that works. So she's praying, and she gets past the witches. See, my fairy tales and faith, they literally go, So she's praying, and she gets past the witches, and to that point, she does this a couple of times, and one time the priest is like, you have to see this. So the king goes, and he sees her go by where the witches are, and he's like, oh my gosh, she's a witch. Oh no. So they put her on trial. They're like, are you a witch? But she can't talk, so she can't defend herself. So she's like, but she can't talk, and she can't say why she can't talk. And so they throw her in prison. They're like, here, no more gold and jewels for you. You can have your nettles. But that's okay, because she's almost done with the 5th. She's done with the 5th shirt. She's just started the 6th. So she's in prison after her trial. They have to figure out what to do with her. And she finishes the 6th shirt. She started the 7th. And then they decide, we got to burn her at the stake because she's a witch. And the king's like, I don't want to burn her at the stake. She's my wife and I love her. And they're like, yeah, but she's a blight on our kingdom and we got to do something. And he's like, oh. So he's heartbroken, but he doesn't really have a choice. He's been kind of backed into a corner. So they are bringing her up to the stake, and she's finishing up. She's only got one sleeve left on the 7th shirt. She got real fast at this as time went by. And so she's almost done. And these swans show up, and they just like surround the pyre as they're tying her to the stake. Oh, also the night before was a full moon, and these princes show up, and they like demand to see the king, and like, but he's sleeping, so they don't get him in time, which is duh. So she's there, and then she's got her bundle of shirts, and they're like, don't give the witch her witchy stuff. But one of the hangmen is like, got it, like, look how sad she is. Give her nettle shirts. So she finally gets herself untied a little bit. So she takes one shirt, so she starts chucking the shirts in the air. But as she's about to throw the 7th shirt in the air, the wind pushes it out of her hand, and it's still missing a sleeve, by the way. That's important. And as she's throwing shirts, her brothers like fly into them, and then they land, and they're her brothers, except one brother has a swan wing. And she's like, okay, now I can talk. I'm not a witch. I was solving a curse. And the king is like, oh, thank goodness. I knew you couldn't be a witch. See, take that. And so she's like, oh, also, by the way, I think I love you. Congratulations. And her brothers are like, yeah, she saved us. She did all this work for us. Look at her hands. Can we get some lotion here? So they all live happily ever after. And then they find their father, and the evil stepmother has run away or been murdered. No one's really sure. She's gone. Oh, no. And they all live happily ever after, reunited with their father. And that's the end of that story. Have a wonderful day.